Hello everybody and welcome to another hobby cheating video. And today it's time to get grim and dark. It's time to paint up some Trench Crusade. Let's get into it.
The strict technomancer that is Vincey V. Let us get to the technique and learn it, Vincey V.
Uncle Adam and myself, we've got a new podcast called Snarlcast talking about indie games and game design. If you haven't checked it out yet, there's lots of episodes out. You can find it in the link below. The reason I mention it is because a frequent topic of conversation over the past several podcasts has been Trench Crusade. Now, Trench Crusade is, of course, this probably isn't the first time you're hearing about it, but just in case, it's a indie but very successful, very cool sort of alternate history war game. Yeah, skirmish game. And it's from a bunch of designers and artists that I really like and appreciate. And so I wanted to get into it. Uncle Adam was nice enough to print me up some figs, and so I today am going to paint the Werewolf from the Heretic Legion. Now, I haven't actually decided what group I want to make yet, but I have decided that this Werewolf is totally awesome. So let's head over to the desk and let's get painting. One of the nice things about skirmish games is that you don't have a lot of figures. That being said, we're still going to do this in a relatively quick, gritty, grim-dark style. So, here is the paints I'll be using today. You can see them all laid out here. Now, there's going to be one special guest star later. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss this because I guarantee you're not going to see it coming. So, anyways, here's the paints we're going to use. So, I've got my Werewolf. He's ready to go. And what I'm going to do is just start on the fleshy bits. So he's a wolf, like a werewolf, you get it. At any rate, we're going to start on the fleshy bits that aren't fur covered. Now, I suppose you could actually just paint everything as though it's fur, and some is just very small and sort of thin, and some is more shaggy and long. But I saw and looked around some of the art, and I liked this version that kind of split up the skin parts and the fur parts. So just using a simple progression here of pinks, slowly integrating in these brighter tones, tipping a little bit in toward the yellow at the end, and this sort of brighter, warmer, flesher tone, this peachy color, to get myself to a nice place. Now, one of the things about figures like this, what I want to talk about here for a second is, as you can see the footage of me slowly layering this up, is that when it comes to figures like this, one of the big challenges is often what to do with the area that's very much under the belly. So we have a lot of figures in games that are hunched very greatly like this. And so there's so much hidden. So what I'm going to do is really focus most of my highlights, honestly, on the back, his shoulders, all these other, like the back of his heels and legs, wherever there's exposed flesh that isn't necessarily tucked under. On those lower parts, those hidden parts, my honest answer is you just don't highlight them very much. You can apply some things like some deeper shadows if you want, but for the most part, what I'm doing on those hidden parts away like that, especially for something that's meant to be a quicker paint job, is I'm putting on a base coat, and then maybe I do like one very minor step up layer of highlights on the very tops of the muscle structures where they would be catching just a little bit of light. And honestly, it's going to be fine. People, when they're playing against you, are not going to be taking your figure and turning it upside down and holding it up to the light being like, did you paint this little thing under here? Like, stop it. You're just killing yourself for no reason. We focus our attention on what matters, what people see, and what we're looking at when it's on the table. These are gaming figures. So, again, the backs, the shoulders, all those kinds of things. Back's the heel, whatever's exposed. So I work up in through my peachy flesh tone, and I get, I think, a very nice looking skin. Now at the end, I was working in multiple layers. What I did was basically thin it way down and do 2 to 3 layers of each step in progression on the way up, as you saw me kind of working through this. But for the most part, if you still see layer lines or things look a little rough, you can always take some of that original midtone and just glaze it back down. Okay. Not a huge amount of skin on this guy, but we want it to be bright, pink, and punchy. It's very warm. This figure is going to be very, very warm for a lot of the core elements. These really made up of 3 things: skin, fur, armor. So, we've got to then have some kind of contrast in here. So next up, it's time to tackle the fur. Now, with the fur, I want it to be cold. I want it to oppose some of the very warm rest of this figure and create some interesting visual contrast. Contrast isn't just about value and light or dark. It can also be about the temperature of your paints and many other things as well. So I'm going to use this series of grays. Now, many of these come from the new AMP line from Monument. I do have a full review on the channel. You can check that out if you haven't seen it already. That really, I love a lot of the colors in this range, and they are awesome for doing this kind of work with grays and that kind of thing. So I start by just giving a nice all-over base coat of that gray, as you can see here. My next step then is to take some of this Payne's Gray wash, also in that AMP set, and just give a nice all-over wash to the fur. I'm not normally one for all-over washes, but when it comes to very small fur texture like this, especially on what is meant to be a gaming quick paint job, they are the perfect tool. Hammer, nail, let's go. So I just give it a nice all-over wash. The Payne's Gray wash is perfect. It does exactly what I want. Tints it even a little colder and really make sure those recesses are nice and sort of dark. With that in place, we're then going to do 2 progressions of highlights. And I want to take a moment as this footage is running to talk about my goal here. Now, I'm treating this fur, okay, like it's clumped. That is to say, I don't highlight every individual piece of fur. Instead, I focus in the grays on what would be the tops of the volumes if this were one solid structure. What I mean here is, you'll see on the tops of the shoulders, the tops of the ridge line along his back. And I only cover about half the fur. I am tracing with thin lines the little individual elements of these structures. So I do not, this is one of the things I see people do. They trace every little piece of fur all over the entire thing. We go from very dark to very light, and we just go from the deepest recesses straight up. Do not do that. Fur has to be treated like volumes that has, and given that sort of volumetric light, no differently than the muscle structure. If that was one flat surface, you wouldn't just paint the whole thing bright, nor would you do it with the fur. So where the fur is on planes that are more upward facing, more towards the top of the individual volumes, that's where I'm applying my first highlight. I go kind of broad, but I make sure that it's there. Now, once I move up to my brighter colors, so integrating in now my very, very bright gray, you'll see that here I cover even less and focus even more to the very tops of those things. So now, again, working in thin lines. I'm not trying to do the whole thing, just lots of nice little thin lines that are then traced over that and really, really focus in on the tips of those fur, the tops of those volumes, making sure that we have those areas honed in on. Okay? So that's basically what I want to say here, is that, like, when you're thinking about fur, think about it like if it was all flat, where would you put your highlights? Okay, now look back at the figure and make sure you place your highlights in those locations. All right, with the fur looking good, it's now time for the armor, and that's right, you stuck with us. It's time for the big surprise. So I need to get this all base coated brown. And what am I going to use? Why, I'm going to use this new paint marker. Now, this is the first time I'm playing with one of these, basically. But I've got to say, for a situation like these big flat areas, right? This is like a lot of this armor is just big fat flat panels. Big flat panels. That's a fun thing to say. At any rate, and so these markers actually worked really, really well. So these are from AK, and I think I'm really impressed by how they work. They look good. It dried smooth and even. It was basically one coat to get a nice solid base coat across the thing. I mean, the tip is of a certain size that it's hard to use for very small details, so I don't know how much or how valuable these would be on like really, really tiny spaces or miniatures, but I'm going to keep playing with them. You are going to see a full review of these coming in the future, but I will say, shockingly, I'm kind of interested, especially for speed painting. So stay tuned. But at any rate, I turn it all brown. I get this nice, wonderful dark brown color that's going to serve as the perfect. Now, here, and in a lot of the art, all the metal on the Heretic Legion is very, very rusty. So that's why we're starting with the brown on everything. From this point, I'm going to take some warm brown from Monument, mix it in with some of the orange, again from that AMP set, and we're going to start working our way up into rust. Here, yet again, I'm going to apply towards the highlights, towards the tops of the volumes, the upward-facing planes, the edges, things like that. But because this is also weathering, I'm focusing in the rust on the areas where it would naturally weather. That is to say, around things like rivets on edges, in cuts and scratches and depressions in the armor and things like that. But you'll notice that as I'm doing this, I'm doing a stippling, stabby motion. That's because this rust is not going to just be a smooth layer, like, we would layer a cloak or something like that. Instead, it's going to be, very uneven, and to have the credibility of that rust, we use this stabbing, stipply texture as I build it up. Though where the light and the lighter rust shows is still, again, going to be in the areas where there is more light. That's the tops of volumes, edges, things like that. The only difference is you're focusing in as well on things like the rivets, the cuts, and so on. But the basic rules of where the highlights are still remains exactly the same. So as I build my way up into the orange, I am still focusing in on like the top of his helmet, right? The edges of things like that. You'll see I edge highlight a lot of those when I get to the very orange. The very edges of the armor plates, around the rivets in the armor plates, and so on and so on. Okay, so having built that up into the orange, these were and are, well, they are metallic. They were probably nice looking metal at some point in time, but I doubt this weird werewolf takes care of his armor at all. But we need to work in some amount of the metal. So I'm going to take basically a pale burnt metal from Vallejo Metal Color, and what we're going to do is just put in some nice thin, very thin scratches, dots, hashes, and stipples around the metal to show areas where the rust has been knocked away, chipped away, and revealed bright, shiny metal underneath. So you'll notice I do a couple small scratches. You've got to vary them in size. They should be drawn more toward edges where something would naturally impact and then drag along the surface, as well as places where the thing is going to attack. So like the front of his weird open mouth is all of that. I just do a nice little scratchy edge highlight along there, a little stipple, dibby dab, to give that impression that as he's been, I guess, biting people, shoving that weird mouth into people, I don't know what he does. I don't know how he fights. But as he's doing that, it's wearing away some of the rust and revealing the fresh metal underneath. This is a minor step, but it does help make it look like, yes, that was actual metal under there, and it adds a lot of credibility to the overall image of the thing. Okay, with that, we're almost done with our speed paint job. We got one more small thing to do. That one more small thing we want to do is these little tubes. Now, here we wanted to keep it simple. This is a minor detail. We've nailed the three big elements. So here I just take some red. Again, this is the black red from the AMP set. And I'm just going to go ahead and give this a nice coat of the red. Nothing too complicated. I grabbed some of my original PG tone from the skin, mix that in to then give myself a nice highlight of each individual little section of the tube, as well as the other wires and stuff like that that's there. We want some travel of the light, though we don't need an absolute ton of it. But we want to show that there's some tonal variation and value change there on this, this sort of column-like tubular surface, right? Once that's all done, I again grab that Payne's Gray wash because I want to bring a little coldness into this, especially in the shadows. Give it a nice all-over wash, and we're good to go. So all in all, that's the major elements done. A couple of other final notes of some things I did here. When I did the base, I made sure to take some of the pigment. That comes up onto his feet, of course. I did his individual little nails in some of the gray. That's a very minor element. His small little fingernails, I made them dark with just a little bit of gray on them. And then finally, I added some rust streaking to the armor plates. I've covered that in this previous video, but these were just very quick, like 1-minute steps. Just taking some of that thin orange I had earlier and drawing some streaks down the armor plates to make sure they were all ready to go. And with that, this is how the werewolf came out. Here he is. I think he looks pretty cool. Not bad for about 2 hours of overall work. Very fast paint job. With a skirmish force, you can, I think, 2, 3, 4 hours is perfectly acceptable for your individual minis. If you need like 10 of them, that's not bad. That's, I think, a reasonable amount of time to get a force on the table. That's why I love painting up skirmish forces. You can spend more time with them, give them more individual love, and still have a better looking thing in the end. So, if you liked this, give it a like. Subscribe for additional hobby cheating. We'll have new videos here every Saturday, possibly even some more grimdark Trench Crusade stuff in the future as I decide, what warband am I going to explore fully. If you want to support the channel, help me keep making videos like this, it's deeply appreciated. There's lots of links down below, affiliate links where you can find all your hobby supplies. Doesn't cost you anything extra. In fact, with a lot of those links to pick up the paints and things you saw today, it'll actually save you money. But if you want to take your next step on your hobby journey, there's also, of course, our Patreon focused on review and feedback. We'd love to have you as part of the community. There's also the podcasts I make with Uncle Adam, as well as the skirmish games we make together. So if you're interested in those, you can check all of those out below. If you're somebody who likes these types of indie games like Trench Crusade, maybe you like what we have on offer as well. We've recently launched a brand new game, so check it out. As always, though, I thank you so much for watching this one, and we'll see you next time.